Hello. How are you today? I called this a mystery stream today because my original stream, if you follow the channel, was supposed to be an interview with Andrew talking about Fate of the Norns. That got postponed. It turns out I think we're going to do that tomorrow. So I was bummed out that I didn't get to do it today, but we're getting to do it tomorrow. But of course, that means that I needed something to do today, and that also meant that the regularly scheduled OSR Roundup wouldn't take place tomorrow. So I decided, as I couldn't think of anything in particular to do today, I just thought, well, I'll do the OSR Reddit Roundup today since I'm not going to get to do it tomorrow. So there it is. And I kind of just decided this moments ago, so I didn't really have a chance to post it anywhere or alert anybody that I'm doing this, but that's what I'm doing. Maybe I should post it somewhere. But there it is. Give it a refresh. I'm on the hot tab as usual. So we're gonna take a look and see what's going on. And it's just gonna be a Thursday instead of a Friday. And I apologize to anyone who's expecting this tomorrow and is gonna feel bait and switched when it said it's an interview and then realize that, haha, I have fooled you and posted it today. It happens, but at least I'm getting it in this week as opposed to doing something I'm not even sure what and then missing it. So let's see what's going on in the OSR subreddit today. We've got the Hellkite Poltergeist is a monster. Seems like it's an image, so we could check that out. I'm all about monsters. Looks kind of creepy. Kind of looks, I'm not even sure what it looks like. A worm with, I'm trying to think. It really reminds me of something. So it's kind of a worm, but it's almost with a spearhead type head portion, but then it kind of splits. It doesn't open like you might think, where the edge or what you might call like the beak of this thing is not where it opens up. In fact, it kind of splits crossways, and there's looks like some kind of skeletal teeth inside there, and there's some sort of antennae or whiskers or something that come off. Very creepy. I don't know what CIH means. CIH, C50, I80, H3, 15 in parentheses. Well, I'm not sure. C50. I don't know what that means. Let's see. So the description says a slick, limbless phantom burrowing through the walls. Its head bristles with delicate sensory organs. 2 abilities: of voice imitation, near perfectly replicates any sound it uses for terror tactics, and a bladed tongue that does 2d10 damage, extends 5 meters. Extends 5 meters. What a meter is? What, around 3 feet? So it's got a really long reach. So that's all in the picture. We do have a description posted by, I think this is I should have mentioned this before, posted by Volkavoy. Volkavoy says, Hellkite hives drift through the cosmos like tumbleweeds, latching onto celestial bodies and, unfortunately for you, human space stations. The poltergeist acts as the hive's eyes and ears, scouting unknown life forms and alerting their combat capabilities to hive defenders. The poltergeist is part of a complete alien ecology, just one of dozens of sci-fi horror articles we're creating for our mothership anthology book, Hull Breach. We are currently running a Kickstarter for the book and wanted to show off a little taste of our bestiary. Feel free to snag the poltergeist for your home games and consider checking out our campaign if you want more of where that came from. All right, I'll give that a thumbs up. I don't know enough about mothership. I'm guessing I'm guessing the H is points. But I don't know what those mean. But at least it makes more sense that that's kind of a mothership thing. So I feel bad for not getting it. The picture's cool. Maybe it's kind of going for a remora kind of thing. You know, it's got the sort of sucker and it latches onto fish. I think of sharks and things like that. And this kind of riffs on that a little bit, but definitely with a creepy horror vibe to it. Good stuff. Thank you for sharing, Volkavoy. Someone's got a Kickstarter going. Undying Sands plus Bottled Sea. What is the worst designed TSR era module in your opinion and why? Oof. I don't even know. Someone's got our retro expedition to the Bear Peaks. Parenthetically calling it genre-busting genius. Someone else made a thing. Okay, here, we'll try this one out because I don't think it's taking me anywhere. This is posted by Grudgy. Modern Adventuring and Plunder. It's on itch. It says it's a free OSR adjacent rule set. Modern Adventuring and Plunder. It's available on itch. We can go check it out. See if we can get a hold of it. I will post the link into the chat. This is called Modern Adventure and Plunder. Or Modern Adventuring and Plunder. And Plunder. Don't forget our Plunder. There we go. What have we got to see? Okay. Modern Adventuring and Plunder is a lightweight, streamlined, and extensible rule set in the spirit of old-school Renaissance. It provides everything you need to run a tabletop role-playing game in a fantasy world. If you like exploration, combat as war, player skill and rulings not rules, you will feel at home. What is special about Modern Adventuring and Plunder? Not a retro clone. MANP keeps the spirit of OSR but doesn't constrain itself with the original mechanic, but compatible with existing modules. I run castles in Tillin, Wizard's Vengeance, and Praise the Fallen without converting any monsters or traps. Any adjustments are done on the fly as rulings. It's small. The size of the rule set is 6 by 9 pages and will never go over 32. Bold words. It will never go over 32 pages. I mean, it's 30 now, and it will never go over 32. You can read it in half an hour and start playing. But it's complete. This is a complete system with fully fleshed rules, 44 spells, 40 monsters, 43 talents. No need for DIY unless you want to. Classless and levelless. Arcane Thief, Paladin with Lockpick, Spell Sword, a Vampire Hunter. You can be anything you want. Grow your character in any direction with a talent system. Streamlined, only 4 attributes, no separate saving throws. All checks are roll above. Turn Undead is just another spell. No special thief skills. Flexible. Expand possible classes and specialization through a system of talents and spells. Equipment and encumbrance matter. No counting pounds, limited inventory slots, force players to make tough decisions. What equipment is most useful? Fast start. Choose one of 4 playbooks. Choose a name. Ready to play. And then you can down your own. You can download it. Name your own price. I'll just leave it here. May have to come back and check it. I'll add it to my collection so I can come back and maybe I'll pull it down and do something with it later, but that's cool. Did I get an upvote? No, I didn't. Give it an upvote. Here we have something that might be good. Oh, it's a YouTube video. Oh, it's a YouTube video. Hey, Terrence. I'm all up for learning how to hex crawl the free Kriegspiel way, but I'm not going to watch a video on my video. If I was on Twitch, maybe I'd do that. Haha, a little timely joke upon Twitch streamers watching whole videos on their streams. I shan't be doing that today, but maybe if I can find it in text form or something else, I'll check it out. No, nothing. It sounds like the kind of system that you like. Oh, great. No, nothing. Well, it's pay what you want. I don't know if you can pay nothing. If you just want it totally for free, of course, it's always nice to contribute something. So yeah, throw Grusgy, or I'm sorry for butchering the name. Throw them a couple of bucks and give it a read. Let me know what you think, and maybe I'll cover it on the channel at some point because yeah, I'm interested in it, and I'm definitely curious about how it does what it says it wants to do. My most used OSR book, BX, I guess. I mean, but it's a core book, so it probably makes sense that would be my most used one. Space Fantasy OSR games, I'm not sure. I know there's someone's looking for a Beckme style character sheet. Wanting to start an OSR GE. Is that they've missed? Is that supposed to be OSR game? Don't know where to start. Oh, we got some treasure. Dorian's Shield. Dorian's Shield, posted by JMH Nilbog. I guess it's just a thing. Here it is in the text description. It's a shield. It's magic enough to deflect a significant amount of blows. Strapped to your arm, a portrait of you forms on the inner side of the shield. The Portrait has the same max hit points as you do. Attacks that the shield deflects do damage the portrait instead. When you heal, so does the portrait, so as long as you are still wearing the shield. The portrait dies, the shield and your arm become a solid lead sculpture. If the shield is broken, you die. If another dons the shield, you take double the damage the portrait has taken. Destroying the paint or defacing it does damage to the portrait. Is it cursed? It just is. You can take it off and leave it somewhere, but what if something happens to it? I mean, it's intriguing. I like some of the things. This is obviously the picture of Dorian Gray in shield form. I think the one thing that probably would need to cover with something like this is what does it mean when we say if the shield deflects the damage? Because there isn't a set system in place for that. Now, you could probably just make it easy and say, okay, this shield adds 2 to your armor class. If something misses you by 2 or less, that would indicate that the shield deflected it, and therefore it leads to that effect. Hey, Fluffy the Griffin. But it's a cool idea. I don't know about it turning your arm to a solid lead sculpture. I don't know what that means, a solid lead sculpture. I guess it just turns you to lead, or turns your arm and the shield to lead. I'm not sure why your arm and the shield. There probably could be something a little bit more fun could maybe die. That one seems a little bit too just kind of like, okay, and just, like, what do I do with that? So my arm is solid lead. Does it just fall off my body? Is it part of my body? How does that work? Not the most creative thing we could do if we really want to have fun with the concepts of the portraits and the person, and some kind of linking that obviously happens between the shield and the wearer. Could maybe be a little bit more fun. And then the thing is okay, you could take it off and leave it somewhere. What if something happens to it? We got to follow that through a little bit. Well, the shield is somewhere. So the person, does that just mean the person who had it dies? I mean, at some point the shield just goes inert. What makes it inert? Did someone use a wish spell? I might like to know maybe a little bit more. I suppose we can just come up with it. I mean, this is just someone just dropping it on the internet and maybe haven't thought it all through, but they're not trying to sell it to us or anything. So yeah, we could take this and do whatever we want. It's kind of a cool item. Love the Griffin says, it sounds like a spitballed idea that never got refined. Yeah, I mean, which is fine, right? I mean, this is kind of, I feel like this is what places like Reddit are for, right? Bring it in, talk about it. Charlotte Stokely, coming straight out of Jane Austen. I think that's Charlotte Stokely, right? Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, says, do you get lead poisoning? And then the OP responds, I think you do just fine with a lead arm. You just can't move without bending it like a miniature, or blood pools at your shoulder until the whole arm pops off in an explosion of gore. Or you get lead poisoning, or you collect an army of street urchins who lick your arm like the sweet, sweet candy it tastes like, and it gets weird. So maybe that last one, that's a quite an image. Maybe we get a little bit where this person's coming from. And then Charlotte Stokely responds to that saying, life is like that sometimes. Yes, it is, Charlotte. You guys can all have a couple of votes. And then Own Potato 3158 asks, wait, why does it turn to lead? Can you resurrect the portrait? And then the OP responds, resurrecting lead would turn it into gold. He's being a little bit, not facetious is the word, not really giving serious responses, but I think clearly the idea is here, maybe their thinking is just, hey, go with whatever the gonzoest thing that comes to mind. Unlucky Leopard likes a lot. I think I want a different outcome if the portrait dies, although I'm not sure what. That's pretty much where I am. I like it. Probably like a little bit of a different, tweak it a bit. Nothing says solid lead arm is fine, but not very rich thematically. No, and that's where I think, I mean, look, you're just putting on the internet. It's great. But I think often as a creator, even if it's just for your home game, think about, hey, you have this thing that's got this kind of really cool stuff. Don't just go with the first thing that could happen. Like, I don't understand what does the portrait, where's the lead connection? This isn't, if it was the shield of Midas or something, or gold or lead or something, or something like that, you're like, okay, gold, lead, like there's a connection there. Maybe if when it's doing well you're getting gold, but then something happens, you just get lead. Like there's a alchemical connection between the two. Maybe do something with paint or painting. They're already talking about, hey, if you scrape the paint off, something bad might happen. Well, maybe we can do something that. Yeah, just think more in the theme. But it seems like the OP is more just like, this is kind of a hook for any kind of gonzo weird thing you want to happen. So just happen. And Terrence says you can make a little bit of cash selling arm chunks to local fishermen. Absolutely. You could. Hey, Brian Smith. Glad you can make it. If you're just joining late, this was why I called this a mystery stream, but I decided to do the OSR Reddit read along early because tomorrow is the rescheduled interview that I was supposed to have today with a couple of the guys from Fate of the Norns. So rather than do something random and then miss out on this week's OSR Reddit Roundup, I decided I would just do the OSR Reddit Roundup today. But I only came up with this in the last few minutes. I had a little flurry of emails rescheduling stuff, so I didn't really have a chance to advertise that was today. So apologies to anyone who misses this live because they thought it was tomorrow. 1,000 apologies. Where was I? Okay, there's Dorian's shield. Okay, there's a podcast. Like, what unconventional armor rules have you tried or found? This might be interesting as a question. What unconventional armor rules have you tried or found? Submitted 18 hours ago. Okay, and there's responses here. Good. By Bugzug. If you're a fan of combat as war, never as sport, you probably won't like this post. Sorry. I want armor to feel like armor. I want it to have significance. While I love and respect simple equipment rules, I think having weapons and armor just be a bunch of static values with very minor differences takes a lot away from the interesting nuance and complexity of both real martial arts and game design as a whole. I want to have really satisfying combat where hits feel visceral and powerful. There are several systems that scratch this itch for me, but all of them either use the default armor class or a damage resistance value with no other nuance besides maybe dropping your movement speed by 15% or what have you. What armor rules have you played with that made armor feel important and satisfying? What armor rules have you found in books, blogs in your mind that seem interesting but you haven't tried? What's the worst rules you've used? I'm specifically looking for any system that is more nuanced than just AC/DR, but if it uses those ideas and adds onto that, I'm absolutely open to it. This is kind of interesting. I'm sort of two minds myself. I think there is something satisfying when you have a really low or high armor class. I feel like when I'm playing a fighter and I've got, I don't know, an armor class of 1 or 0, I got a little extra swagger. I'm feeling myself a little bit. So I'm like, yeah, I'm tough to hit. Come get some goblins, kobolds, what have you. You know, you're gonna have a hard time hitting me. I do think that has some satisfaction. Now, is it as satisfying as it's got all kinds of pizzazz? I don't know, but you do fall into the, not necessarily the trap, but there's how much are you getting for the amount of complexity you're going to add in? I really liked something that they had in the old TSR Conan games, and I've never actually run that game. I've just read it, and there's some really cool stuff I like. And one of the things I like is they have piecemeal armor, where things will roll, or in combat, you'll have your armor, but different areas will have essentially different damage reductions. And then when something hits you, they'll roll to see where they hit you. And if you're wearing a chainmail shirt and they hit you in your chest, it's all good. But if you were just wearing short shorts, or you just were wearing jorts and they hit you in the legs, well, then you're down for hurting. But if you had plate mail leggings for whatever reason, but not plate mail arms, your legs would be well protected and the other stuff wouldn't. I thought that was really neat. And it had kind of a little bit of randomness in there. It added to your narrative. You'd be able to point to exactly where it hits, and the players could visualize where they're hitting it because they're going to see exactly where they hit it. Now, where it falls down a little bit when I've tried to adapt it to larger games is, of course, it works great if your PCs are all humanoids and you can just roll that chart. When you're rolling against creatures, then you have to either come up with a bunch of charts or make the charts a lot more generic, because if you're fighting a purple worm and you roll legs, what does that mean in terms of the purple worm? Or what does it mean in terms of some creature that don't have all the limbs? What if it has no head and I'm rolling the head? And yes, I can just off the top of my head, I can come up with something, but it just makes it a little less easy. It just makes it that anytime I roll that, I have to think about, okay, what does this mean in this circumstance? The other thing is it's an extra die you're rolling every time. It's an extra checking. Player's going to have to know or be able to relate to. You're going to have to see not just one value for their entire armor class of their body, but for each different area. Oh, I hit you in your head. Where is it? What's your damage reduction armor class for your head? Okay, what's your damage reduction armor class for your left arm, your right arm? So is it worth, for whatever joy you get out of that, is it worth the extra work? I don't know, but I'll be interested to see what they have below. That would be the one if I could try to get it into a little bit of a more streamlined state, that having that kind of piecemeal armor, especially because I feel like I'd like to have a game where armor is really as expensive as it kind of feels like it was in real life, in terms of, to get plate mail, you really had to be kind of rich, or I don't know, or maybe honored or something. Just not anybody just coming out of the village just goes to the plate mail store and picks up their plate mail on the way. That's something you get. You have to go and get fitted. And at some point, I know they did have kind of factories that were putting out a lot of heavy armor. I think later on, the end of the medieval period or into the Renaissance, but go back to earlier time when I would like to have it where it's like, okay, I want plate mail. Well, you got to find the smith who can do it, and it's going to take them 6 months to craft it for you. But maybe you could find these odds and ends, these bits. I remember the 13th Warrior, where like one of the guys just had a random gladiator helmet on, and then kind of all their armor seemed kind of piecemeal. And I did like that a lot. So that might be my one I would like to try. But in terms of mechanics, it is just still AC/DR. It's just for different areas were into each other. Elfbait says, armor does one thing, protect you. Yeah, I think people, Elfbait asks, what kind of nuance does he expect from armor? I think people just like, what is it? I don't know if it's Into the Odd or whichever one it is, that basically all your character abilities essentially come from your gear. I think there is, I've seen it on some other posts, and I think I have on my reading list that I want to look at, is people looking at the game saying, I really want a materialistic game. Essentially, everything comes from stuff you've picked up in the world, as opposed to more esoteric advancement, so that you're a fighter because you've got fightery stuff, and that fightery stuff kind of helps you. So what does your damage, what does your armor do? Does it unlock cool abilities? Things like that. That's kind of like I think a lot of the appeal of the modern game is all these abilities that you're getting. And in some way, this may be something similar. We're thinking, well, if I've got plate mail, like, what does it do for me? Can I do cool charge attacks because I've got plate mail on, and now I've got extra armor? Or does it give me some kind of defensive something else? Or does it break apart into pieces? And I don't know. I can't say for the OP, but I think there is, for at least a certain segment of players and GMs, that they like item-driven mechanics. Of course, there's magic stuff, but just outside of magic stuff, just having extra mechanical hooks for armor and stuff. Brian Smith says, I recently learned about Viking Death Squad, which has a max of 12 armor points. Each hit removes armor points, and when you're not armored, any hit kills you. That's interesting. Now, Brian Smith, I would ask about that. Are those armor points completely lost, and how does that translate to the fiction? So if I've got my scale mail or banded mail, and I've got a wooden shield, and do those things get degraded, or is it just another way of kind of saying hit points? Because essentially, the way it reads is you're just reframed hit points as armor points. Because just like hit points, each hit removes some of the points, and when you get down to 0, basically you're dead, and it seems like about the same. So I'm curious how that works with that. It would be really interesting if you had those points attached to different pieces of your kit, and you had to do something to... You couldn't just regenerate them, or they didn't just come back. You'd have to spend time fixing your armor, doing something like that, and which sounds cool, but again, it's adding a lot of complexity, adding a lot of time on your character sheet. Do I have to now, okay, my shield has 3 armor points, now it's down to 1 armor point, I have to track that, right? You're adding some extra accounting. Is it worth it what you're getting or not? But in theory, it sounds kind of cool depending on how they've implemented it. I've not heard of that game. I will have to look it up. Elpit says, the farthest I would go is making armor have better or worse effects against different types of damage. Yeah, and you can see that in the, where is it? Let's see. I've got chainmail handy, and chainmail has essentially that in its, here we go. I'm going to switch to myself for a second. In this handy dandy, can you see it? Oh, let me move it over here. Man-to-man melee table. You can see that there are different attack values, different kind of hits for different weapons versus different armors that basically simulate that sort of relationship. But I've never actually used it. It's one of those things that I wish, again, if I could come up with a way to streamline it or maybe put it into a VTT to make it fairly painless to use, I'd like to, but I don't know if I want to slow down my combats with those just out of the box. Brian Smith says, the OP is saying they want armor to feel like armor and have hits feel visceral and powerful. To me, seems like they want to feel invisible when armored and fragile when unarmored. Could be. I mean, yeah, that's one thing with hit points, because if you have 50 hit points, you have 50 hit points whether you're wearing plate mail or nothing. Of course, in a combat situation, if you have 50 hit points and you're with no armor or anything on and you're getting whacked all the time, you're going to more quickly feel it than you would if you were armored. But there is a fair point saying that there should be more maybe difference. And maybe you would say, well, something like armor points, I guess, could be at least putting the emphasis on your hit points don't come from your class levels or anything. They come from what you're wearing. So, oh, you're wearing plate mail, you have X amount of hit points. Oh, you're wearing nothing, you have 3 hit points. Deal with it. That might actually be an interesting way to run it. Maybe that's the kind of armor points thing is, hey, everyone's got 4 hit points. Or I wouldn't even say 6. Everyone's got 6 hit points. And your armor just adds more hit points to you. So if you're wearing plate mail, you're going to have 12 hit points. If you're wearing leather, you're going to have 8, 9 hit points. So maybe you go, what would it be? I don't know. Start off with 6. Maybe you'd say 12. So you say, okay, if you're wearing light armor, you got 8 hit points. If you're wearing medium armor, you have 10 hit points. Heavy armor, 12, and a shield adds another 1. And then that's it, right? And so once you've kind of whacked down all that stuff, then you're just going to die. And it's just a matter of, instead of it looking at it, it's kind of over a single combat, over a single melee, it's just a matter of you getting beaten down over. But those armor points will regenerate each time you're out of combat, say after a short rest or an hour or something. You essentially, those are back, or whatever you want to do. Could just be right at the end of combat or after some amount of time. However you want to do it, you've kind of gotten yourself back in order, made sure all your armor plates or everything's well done. You've readjusted yourself and you're okay, and then your body hit points maybe come back slowly. That'd be an interesting thing to do, I think. Brian Smith says, I like that concept that your gear advances your character, and without it, you're just a normal dude. I always feel torn about that, because yes, it is cool, but on the other time, I kind of feel like you are what you are, whether you have the gear or not. Like someone who's an expert fisherman, for example, is a really good fisherman, whether they have the best fishing pole and tackle and stuff in the world, or they've got some string and a stick. There's all that knowledge and everything that they know about fishing that they've learned, reading the water, reading the weather, knowing what certain fish like, where to fish them. That has nothing to do with their gear. And the same way, I think a guy's a great fighter, whether you give him a wooden stick or a sword. It's just that they know things. I don't mind that in some ways you make things easier, but I kind of feel like that the great technicians are going to use whatever tools they have. You give a great lock pick a toothpick and a paper clip, they're going to make it work. You give me the best lock picks in the world, I don't know what I'm doing. And while I think, sure, if I knew a little bit of what I'm doing, having those great tools is going to help me a little bit, it's that knowledge and all that mastery and stuff that has nothing to do with your equipment. Conan's not a great warrior because he has the broadsword. The broadsword is a devastating weapon because it's Conan who's wielding it. In my hands, it's just a really heavy, sharp metal anchor that I'm going to be dragging along the ground and having a really hard time trying to lift. And then I don't really like that thing, which seems to me, and I haven't read enough into this stuff. No, but just, okay, I drop that sword and I pick up a bow, and suddenly I'm Robin Hood with a bow. It's not, I guess it just doesn't reflect the kind of stories that resonate with me. I'm not in love with that so much, but I get the appeal. Elfbait says, I think a more realistic armor rule system is great for games where combat is something to be avoided. Yeah, I totally don't think that this having some more nuance to your armor rules is necessarily going to mean that everyone's going to run into combat, because you can make those rules not particularly forgiving to people getting into combat. I think it just depends on your rules, right? In a combat is deadly game, I can see it working, sure. Ooh, no, nothing. Talking about their system. No, nothing says, in my system, I use critical effects as injuries, and they are a big deal. Armor mediates the critical effect injuries. Okay, that's a cool way of doing it. Brian Smith says, I like the monsters in 5e that degrade weapons / gear, like rust monsters or the oozes that melt weapons. I don't think they get used often, but it's a cool vestige of older versions. Maybe. Yes, I do like it. Though, I have to say, I don't like, and this isn't even coming from role-playing games. I couldn't get into Legend of Zelda, the Breath of the Wild, because this stuff was degrading just on me all the time, and I just felt like I was getting trapped in this annoying cycle of having to craft new weapons and things all the time. At least it felt like all the time to me, and it was just annoying me. So I would think with stuff like that, it's good when they come up and they're special. If everything's doing it, it's just, I just feel like you're putting the party on this treadmill. So I got to carry 8 swords around now, or I either have to come up with goofy things to stay around it, or it just becomes too much. So yeah, I think they're great because they can be really horrifying, and because you can be down in a dungeon in not a great spot, and something happens and suddenly your one weapon is gone and now you're scrambling around for what to do. That's great. If it's overused, if everybody had some kind of degrading ability, I just think it would just get to be frustrating not in a great way. Elfbait says, detailed armor also works well in more dynamic combat where the combat system isn't just hit-miss. Dodging, parrying, and other options and make a more weighty protection system not seem so clunky. Also true. I think if you're going to have combat being more involved, like if I was running a game that had a lot of gladiator combat, like we were playing a gladiators game, and these guys are going to have to go in and do kind of one-on-one or sort of squad level combats where that is kind of the thing. This is where you're getting into the arena and it's important. Then having a lot of those, parry and maybe some kind of rock, paper, scissors, where if you do a normal attack, a parry would work, but if you do a feint, then that will get around the parry and then you could block, but then this will happen. You can kind of have a lot of that stuff. It's just game to game, right? It is having that extra thing is adding as much to your game as it is slowing down those particular combats. If I was having a one-on-one gladiator style, Maximus versus whatever that other guy's name, and those moves all become really important. That's really what it's all about, since the arena is basically flat and empty except for the tigers when they pop out of the ground. But before that, it's just empty. Then all those little counter moves are super important. I'd want a system like that. And you're just going down the dungeon or you're in the wilderness. I don't know if it was worth it. I might just rather say, hey, you just get it. You're a fighter, so you have better armor class, or you have better whatever, or you're better attack or whatever, because you understand parrying and things like that. And you're the wizard, you don't, so you're less likely to hit or whatever it is, and just and abstract it out a bit. Oh, no, nothing's out of here. All right, now nothing. Take it easy. Glad you could join for when you could. Elfbait says, I wouldn't run a system like that in a game where hordes of monsters or enemies were a thing. Right. That's pretty much where I come out. And then Fluffy the Griffin says, monsters that degrade weapons are more a hazard than a creature to fight. They serve as a gotcha when you first see one, then they become an obstacle. Yep. Right, because the first time you see that rust monster and it does something, you're like, oh gosh. Next time you see the rust monster, it's okay, let's all get out wood, or I don't even forget what. I think it's rust monsters where it's just metal. So it's like, okay, everyone have a club, or just close the door. Right, it does take away a bit of that. It does turn it into a different sort of thing. Absolutely. Mission Landscape 17 comments, OSR armor rules are abstract by design, and I really think when you start messing with AC, you also need to mess with HP. If you want to see some very detailed combat rules on this, try GURPS. It has rules on how weapons interact with armor based on how you use them, swinging versus thrusting, and how they deal damage, piercing, cutting, crushing, and rules for variable hit location, including both localized armor and hit points, and rules on crippling injuries and blow-through. If you want a rule set that tries to simulate reality, GURPS is the way to go. You can't, now D&D does have some of that stuff, depending on edition. It's usually kind of edge casing, things like, skeletons, if you're using a slicing as opposed to slicing or stabbing. I forget which one. Maybe it's stabbing is less likely to hit or does less. I forget, because there's just a lot of space in a skeleton. But if you've got a club or something that's a crushing type blow, that does better. So D&D has a little bit of it. They just don't usually get into it. But often you'll see, depending on edition, you'll see next to a sword or an axe or a club or something, what kind of damage it does. So they do have hooks if you want to do a little bit of that. And like I said, Chainmail does have weapons versus armor. And I want to say Lamentations had something which I thought was quite clever. I think, so forgive me, but something like an axe or a club or a mace or something might have had that there was basically a maximum armor class, which I think the idea was pretty cool. So it was saying, okay, if you have a mace, the maximum armor class a defender can have is basically up to medium armor. And the reason for that is that heavy armor just isn't much more effective against a mace than medium armor, because the mace, with the kind of damage it does, plate mail doesn't prevent that much. That's not really plate mail's forte. And that's a lot of time. That's kind of why maces and pole arms with sort of those with hammers and things like that became more, because of plate mail. So it's saying, hey, if you're wearing chainmail and you're facing a sword, it might make a difference. Plate mail is going to be more effective. But if you're going up against someone with a mace, that max armor class is essentially going to say that you're no better off in heavy armor than you were in medium armor. And I thought that was really cool. I think it's Lamentation, so forgive me if it's something else. Somebody let me know. Brian Smith says going back to monsters, they act a lot like monsters that can poison you or something too. The first time you experience a debilitating effect, you prep for it next time. Yes, of course, if you're playing a game where it's just save or die, then it might be a little bit different, but yes. Yellow and Fluffy the Griffin brings up yellow mold. Yellow mold is my favorite hazard. Easy to deal with when you're smart, but oh gods, that first time you encounter it. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with the party, and they didn't know what it was, but they kind of knew, and they were wary enough of it to be careful. But it made for a very tense moment, and all it was just this dusting on in this one room, and yeah, they picked up on the fact that this is probably not good for us, and then dealt with it accordingly. But yeah, it was a fun moment. Then Brian Smith says, so the weapon of the attacker determines the AC of the opponent. That's a cool idea. Yeah, it was a little bit, right? So it's basically your class of weapon. And you could do this a lot of things. Like, I don't think they did this with daggers, but you could. You could say, hey, if you're a dagger and you're wearing anything, your minimum armor class is going to be, say, medium armor, but just because anything's going to help you with a dagger. Because it's tough. It's just tough, right? Or you could say, yeah, you're maximum. I mean, you could definitely have some fun with that. Now, it adds a little bit of complexity, but to me, at least, for the player stuff, is you could just make that something that the players have to call out to you. Like, oh yeah, I'm hitting with my mace, and don't forget that it's got a max armor class of 14 if you're using ascending armor class, whatever it was. It was a neat idea. I think it does a good job, I think, of towing that line of, it gives you some extra stuff. It's going to make players think a bit about their choices. And I think they only did it with clubs and maces, though you could probably extend it and do different things. But it did give, okay, there's a little bit of a difference here. If you're using a mace, maybe you're better off at these, but not. Because I always thought it'd be neat if, as a fighter, you'd want to have a selection of weapons. And so you might, if you have a chance to see somebody from 80 feet away or something, you would say, okay, I see these guys are coming in heavy armor. All right, I'm not going to pull out my sword. I'm going to pull out my mace. Or, these guys are lightly armored. Let me get my sword out. Kind of thing. I those kinds of interesting choices I think are cool, as long as they're not adding too much weight. And that was it seemed like a cool way of adding a little bit of weight, but getting a lot of bang for that buck. Elfbait says, this is the problem with heavily abstracted combat. So many plate armored knights died to well-wielded daggers. Yes, this is true. You want to find that balance, right? You want to find that balance to kind of get what you want. I did kind of like the idea of the dagger, that the speed rating a little bit. I always thought was another one was cool. Hey, if you're charging a spear, or the first time the spear is going to go first because it's got reach on you. But then after that, it's slow. And if you have the dagger, you're going to be going in that first round. You're going to go last after everything else because you got to get in super close. But then after that, the assumption is you've kind of gotten in close, and so then you're fast. So in the right hands, you could maybe do something with the dagger and make it more difficult, since if you kill the guy before they can respond, then, hey, being that fast thing works. But if they're ready for you, then you're going to have to get through their defenses first. So I thought that was kind of neat. And the other thing with daggers that I always thought is underrated is that you can carry them everywhere, because it's kind of like you're in the medieval world, you're bringing around your own cutlery, basically. So people could have daggers on them. It's just something you're using for all kinds of things. It's your letter opener. It's your steak knife. It's your teeth picker. You can kind of keep that on you. So if you're good with a dagger or a knife, you could, one, if you need to pick one up, there's probably going to be something laying around. Two, you can get that in places that if you're, hey, I'm the expert with a halberd or a two-handed sword. It's like, yeah, but you're probably not going to, if you're going to invite you to a dinner in a noble's house, probably not going to let you walk and sit at the table with your halberd or your two-handed, Zweihander on you. So that there were, or you're walking around the city or something. You might not be able to pull that out and do anything fast. The guy with the knife can get something done on you. Love the Gurman says the knight's armor is no match to a quick and accurate dagger, though. There's so many joint gaps and small nooks that a dagger can get into. True, but they got to get there first. I think daggers are great at finishing off somebody, but I think you got to get in there. And I don't know. I don't have any practical experience, but I'm going to go with the guy who's armored with something longer against the guy with the dagger, unless that guy with the dagger really shows me something. Because they got to get through that thing first. They got to get through the defenses, and once they've gotten this guy in a bad spot, then use the dagger to maneuver to get in between. But somebody moving around, I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see someone who's moving, facing up one another, and you being able to get in and accurately get between plates while that person's moving around. It looks great on a dummy, and maybe and I know that lots of fights ended at the end of it with someone getting one stuck in, but usually that's kind of that finishing blow that like someone's been sort of put in a vulnerable spot, and then you're able to be really accurate and get in. But I don't think when you're facing off with someone 100% fresh, excuse me, that's happening, but I'm happy to be corrected. Happy to be corrected on that. Brian says maybe you can play with increasing the crit range of a particular weapon versus a particular armor. Maybe a dagger gets a crit on 18 to 20 versus an opponent in heavy armor. I don't know, Brad Smith. Maybe. I mean, I'm not sure I would do that, but again, it's just my impression of things. And my impression is, that dagger was great when you've been able to get in and you've got the guy off balance and kind of he's struggling. Like essentially, it's like you've already beaten the person down and now you need to get in there. But like I said, if this guy is facing up on me and we're straight just one-on-one at say 10 feet away, he's got his sword and his shield. I think I'm going to have a hard time getting through with my dagger. I have a feeling that's not an easy get. Now, maybe in the crush of a melee when I have the angles are all weird and there's 20 people fighting, I can sneak in and stab one. Maybe. I don't know. But that's something, it's a good thing. We can craft these rules to be however we'd like. Elfie says, add to that plate armor is almost invulnerable to so many attacks. Yeah, that's where the maces come in, right? Because it's just hard to get through. I think we could say that just from whether it's one-on-one combat, which we're generally not doing in D&D, even though it maybe seems like we're usually in, I like to think of it as, we're in this kind of scrum, multiple combatants, multiple things. Maybe on a one-on-one, but when I was watching those, they had for a while, it was kind of cool. One of these shows, I was on Discovery History, it was like full-on armor combat, not sharp weapons, but kind of these just melees with basically blunted weapons, and you had to, get guys down and tire them out. Like nobody was just going in there with a dagger to do anything. Now, I don't know if just because the scoring rules they didn't, but and it just seems like it's just hard. It was hard to get in there, but of course, after a few rounds and guys are tired and they're dropping their guards and they're not moving quickly, then I think the dagger gets in there, which it's kind of that hit point thing, right? Your hit points are this kind of whole amalgamation of everything. And when you're tired and you can't get your defenses up and you're moving sluggishly and someone's kind of fresh and they can kind of get in on you, then that's where I feel like the dagger comes into play. So it would be cool, perfectly reasonable. If one of my players said, how do you finish off, they roll their attack, how they finish them off, and then saying, hey, I weave and dodge and the guy's tired, so I get my, if they're, say, dual wielding or something, get their dagger out. But I don't know. But like I said, I'm happy to be swayed if there's, I don't have some kind of hard and fast feeling about it. In game terms, if you got a heavily armored prone or get yourself advantage on your dagger attack, maybe then it could deal much more damage. I don't know. Yeah, you could do something like that. Like maybe you get the heavily armored guy as prone. You could come up with some rules. It's just one of those things. Like, do we want to come up with a whole bunch of rules for that? I don't feel the need. I mean, like in my game, none of my players have said, oh, I really want to do this stuff with a dagger. They're all wielding swords and stuff. But if I had someone who wanted to be super dagger master, then I might say, it might be neat to come up with some things to do with daggers. It's all in your game. Alpha says, this is why abstraction is tricky. Realistic combat is so much a matter of skill as much as the equipment being used. Yeah, and just circumstances. I think It might have been Fluffy the Griffin said back there somewhere, about it being kind of a big sort of scrum as opposed to kind of a one-on-one, almost more ritualistic, say, gladiatorial kind of slapping someone with a glove and doing a trial by combat kind of thing, right? What is the combat like that you're bringing in? Okay, narrative crit. Oh, he's mentioning somebody else. Are they in this thread? Or are they somewhere else? Let's see, because he's mentioning... Nope, somewhere else. You, Track 004, had an awesome OSR-style armor idea, damage reduction, which you can spend to take no damage instead. Your armor has 4 damage reduction, and an attack hits you for 10 damage. Either take 6 damage or block all of it and take 0 damage, reducing your armor to a damage reduction of 3. Oh, that's interesting. That's kind of a variation on the sort of sunder your shields, but it's just you're getting sundered over time. And presumably if you go down to 0, I mean, you're talking about your armor damage reduction, then it's just broken apart. That's kind of interesting. I like it. It's a bit more accounting, but not a lot more. It's player facing and that the players can decide whether to do it or not. Oh, wait, I missed some more comments here. Elfbay says, an interesting example is the Gudendag, a reinforced club with spike on the end, is specifically designed to let militia defeat French knights. Smash from the ground, spike them where it counts. Yep. I think that's why you saw that on a lot of hammers and pole arms and different things, throwing spikes on there for, you get them down, and then when they're prone and presumably not moving all that fast, then you can really aim your shot. I mean, the other thing to consider that, has gotten, I mean, people get reminded all the time is armor you weren't quite as slow and cumbersome in armor as we might have thought back in the day. They showed videos of, look, guys are doing tumbling and stuff in full plate. So you did still have some mobility, but if you get kind of knocked silly or woozy and you're off your feet, quick stab somewhere nasty would do it. Brian Smith says, if I had a dagger in my inventory that was very situational, useful in combat, but weak most of the time, it would be cool just to be able to get one to use it at one time to deal like their damage. Yeah, I would totally be down with that. A system of, hey, this dagger is kind of not your thing, maybe unless you're a thief, right? But in the right spot, it can do something. Cockatrice Nuggets looks like going back to the earlier topic. A lockpick is faster than a toothpick, though. For whom, though, Cockatrice? The idea was that if your equipment makes the man, you give me some lockpicks, I'm not faster than the best lockpick in the world with a toothpick. The best lockpick in the world with a toothpick is still going to be way faster than me, whether you give me the most amazing set of lockpicks that you can get on that everyday carry category on drop or wherever you want to get your lockpicks. Not faster for me. It's only faster for the expert. But that's part of the thing, is that expertise carries over less than the utility of the equipment. Fluffy the Griffin says, like a stiletto was meant to go right through chainmail. Exactly, it was. But I think I would say again, Fluffy the Griffin, that when you're standing still, like if I'm able to come up behind somebody and stab them, I could totally, maybe 8 out of 10 times, 7 out of 10 times find that chink. But if they're moving and they've got stuff over their chainmail obscuring it and they're moving around, chances are I don't think I'm going to have that good a chance. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But I don't think my odds are that good. I think it's totally a different thing if we're talking about, well, I'm going to backstab somebody or I have surprise and I can get in there. I'm not so sure, though, if I have to face the guy 5 feet away, he's got a spear or something, and I've got that stiletto, I don't feel confident I'm getting through. If I'm a much better fighter than he is, sure. Then I can smile and give one of those wry things, say, ho, ho, and then I can do it. But that's where the skill of the combatant more than the particular piece. I mean, that's where you go, if you're Riddick and you say, like, here's the soup spoon or whatever, I'm going to put it down. It doesn't matter because, you're a killing machine. Killing machine. Elvis says chain is pretty much worthless against piercing weapons. Yeah, certainly like your crossbows, longbows, things like that. Absolutely. And yeah, definitely much less effective against things like stilettos. But you didn't see like whole armies going in the field with stilettos for reasons, right? Because it's just not I think it depends. I think the thing is with those weapons is they depend a lot on the skill of the user. Whereas you give somebody an axe or really a spear, and you take a lot of that skill out of it. Anybody, you can give anybody that spear, and they can be fairly effective. If you're going to give somebody a stiletto and say, okay, now go take down those guys in chainmail, it's going to be different. And at that point, we're back to the skill of the user, which means then maybe it's okay that you abstract out the differences in the weapons, because we're really saying, hey, whatever the weapon is, if you're Conan, it's going to work for you. If you're Urkel, it's not. Right? What else have we got here? Let me give Narrative Crit an upvote. Motivox Box says, my house rule, I use glancing blows. For fighter types, fighters, rangers, paladins, their attack rolls equal or above 10, but less than the actual AC. The attack deals 1 damage still. That's not bad. Awkward Inkstain says, that's pretty similar to the shock rules from /Worlds Without Number, which says that a missed attack roll still causes the minimum amount of damage if the target has below a certain AC. It makes the common encounters really fly by. I bet. I think doing sort of side damage will definitely cause faster combats. Well, we got this one, Alistair 49 has got a bunch of stuff for us. Urkel the Barbarians is Terrence. Yeah. Father Griffin, I was just pointing out that maybe at a certain point, if so much is going to depend on the skill of the user, that making all these adjustments for different weapons doesn't actually matter. We're going to come up with all kinds of rules. Oh, well, this does like this and this does against that. If it's still going to come down to the bottom of the line, we're going to say, hey, the better you are kind of thing, then I feel okay with the abstraction because it doesn't matter that much, right? That you're still reliant on the skill, which means that if you're the fighter, you're still the best. And so we don't need to worry about it, because if you're not the fighter, then you're not presumed to be particularly skilled, so that we don't need to play around with the edge cases of these different weapons. That is what I was trying to say. Maybe not. Maybe it didn't come across that well. Elboy says, I think for me, detailed combat needs to go with deadly combat. You have a few life points, so the objective is not to get hurt at all. True. Could be. Let's see what Alistair says, and then we'll move along. These aren't unconventional so much as ideas from games contemporaneous with AD&D 1E when I was playing it, from 1979 onward until 3E came along. So I'd say they're old school in a general sense, if not OSR adjacent, mainly in concepts and playstyle. I like the old range and armor type DMs from Classic Traveler. Once I found the weapon cards idea off the Tales to Astound blog. So he's got some weapon cards. I'll leave that for the moment, but doing a bit of work up front gives you a card with the relevant matrix for each weapon, and suddenly it comes pretty fast in play. Oh, I see what they're saying. So you could come up with these things. If we were going to take, say, stilettos and say, okay, they're good against this, bad against that, if you created a card for it, you could have that card in front of you, maybe as a player, as a GM, and then it would be cutting down on that work of trying to figure things out because you've kind of got it in hand already. I've been thinking of using it to do a 2d6 D&D style dungeon crawl, probably borrowing as needed from the Cepheus Engine Barbaric or Sword of Cepheus rules. I'm not familiar with those. Games like Flashing Blades, RuneQuest 2, and its derivatives have quality of success, which in combat translates to quality of hit. Not so much armor, but whether or not your hit halves or ignores armor or does extra damage, e.g. double, max, or whatever. Interesting, too. I like Knave's Take, which allows weapons and armor to degrade. It seems a bit simpler than the old RuneQuest 2 concepts. There's also related concepts of shields shall be broken, which have been adapted by some to include parrying weapons being broken to stop a bad hit that'd kill you. Some also include helms in this as well. Hit location, yes, it slows the game, but sometimes that is a worthwhile trade-off. And then finally, Stormbringer, at one stage called Elric, had variable armor. If I recall correctly, you rolled damage to hit and you rolled how much the armor protected. A way to simulate in concept varying armor on different hit locations without being bogged down by hit location tracking. I believe Merkburg uses the same idea. I still haven't read Merkburg. And I guess I'll read one more because this one looks interesting. This was posted by Lord Sicarius. My combat/injury system is rather unorthodox. It's more designed to generate discrete injuries, e.g., my bicep has been sliced open, that linger after combat and create interesting narrative consequences rather than as an abstract measurement of who's winning the fight. Combat is rare, dangerous, and often resolved with creative problem solving rather than in some tactical minigame. Within that framework, I have hit locations, and armor comes in pieces rather than complete sets. Armor has 4 important values: location, coverage, which is an X and 6 roll to decide whether random attacks on that limb hit the armor; material affects how weapons interact with it; and damage rating prevents damage up to this amount, fails against stronger attacks. After combat is over and people tend to their wounds, the abstract wounds of combat get resolved into discrete injuries using random tables. At this time, it's entirely possible that the injury generated is one which the armor would have naturally mitigated, use common sense, in which case the GM should reduce the severity of the injury. In practice, armor works kind of like a saving throw. You take some injury, whether from a trap or a fight, you go, wait, shouldn't my armor have prevented that? Roll a d6 and maybe it did. One of the major benefits of the system as a whole is that it ties in quite tightly with the actual description of the monster/enemy in question, rather than just being a bunch of abstract numbers. Yeah, I can see that. That's might be interesting. Let's see. We got some stuff here. Let's see. We got some Fluffy the Griffin and Elfbane. I have a couple of things. Brian Blather says the old D&D character sheets had the matrix for the piercing, slashing, and bludgeoning interactions. Yep. I couldn't remember which particular editions do, but I know they've kind of come and gone. Elfbane says they'd add hacking to it, because axes have a very specific damage profile that is not slashing but not piercing. Could be. Yeah, I could see that. But I think, at what point is it, I think I'm probably okay saying they're slashing, even though, yes, it's not, the slash of an axe is very different than the slash of a blade, of a bladed, sword. But is it enough? Do you want something totally different? I think with axes, I would probably have something where you could kind of sort of give up your attack to try to pull down somebody's shield. Because, axes, they had that curve, from what I understand, to help one guy you could try to hack down somebody's shield. The next guy could get that jab in there. And you don't really see that too much, but maybe because people gravitate towards swords more than shields, and you don't usually have a bunch of fighters. I would kind of like to see that if some people playing fighters really decided to kind of use sort of squad tactics on stuff. Like, okay, I'm gonna try to pull this guy's shield down. Then you guys on your turn, you guys just hack the heck out of him. Do those kinds of things, or we're gonna sort of phalanx it up. Could be cool. Yes, as Brian Smith says, you can always add more granularity. Yeah, I think that's probably the ultimate thing, right? Is, hey, you can see there's plenty of room to add the granularity there if you want it. And I could certainly see situationally adding more granularity. Like I said, if in my game where I'm going by the book abstractions, if I did get into someone saying like, I challenge you to a duel at dawn, sir, then for that duel at dawn, I might bring in some granularity just for that fight. Because it's just that's one-on-one, and we want to amp it up as much as possible. Okay, we've got, let's see, probably the last one. Fluffy the Griffin says, I do have a house rule that flails ignore shield. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that a bunch. I've also seen that I guess not that recently, but not that long ago, this argument of whether flails existed at all, that there is something that they're not even sure that the flail as an actual weapon ever really existed, which I thought was really fascinating. Okay, looking for AD&D with ascending AC. Patchland, Gygax 75 week 1. I don't know what that is. Do you jump from adventure to adventure? Or do you travel from adventure to adventure? Well, my guys tend to travel, but I've done jumping too. Old school mapping while online. Yeah. Best printed OSR books. Oh yeah, reaffirming OSR subreddit support by diversity. I gave that an upvote when I read that the other day. Any OSR games that encourage murder hoboing? I don't know of any games. Are there any games out there that really just encourage you just to kind of kill indiscriminately? I don't know. This might be interesting. Maybe my last one. Best domain system for manor/castle-sized domains. All right, this one seems like, you see these questions come up. This person, who happens to be Logan Maddox, who posted this the other day, seems to have a practical experience that they're just reading from his first sentence that are coming from, and not just a hypothetical, well, when my party gets to domain play, what should we use kind of thing. But it seems like they've got some practical concerns that they're trying to address. So let's read it and see. I've already changed systems twice, and now I'm getting way too disappointed. My players are land-holding knights. Well, one of them is. The others are getting there soon enough. They'd own a 6 mile hex, single 6 mile hex, more or less. I was kind of looking for a system that allows for the management and customization without it being the sole focus of the campaign. I've already changed the XP system so it isn't GP based anymore, but I still feel like there's something amiss. I tried the one in Wolves of God where it gives you a few hides and how much money they generate per season. It's quite cool, but way too involved. You need to constantly pay attention to your land, which is annoying when three players have to individually take care of their respective lands. I don't want to run 3 different solos on the same table. The other one was Dark Albion, which is way too abstract. It doesn't give a solid number of soldiers or money you have on one hand, which works if you want to muster your army and go to battle, but not if you want to take a few men for a mock battle on a tourney. I've considered an Echo Resounding, but by its description, it seems too focused on kingdoms on the borderlands and barbaric, undeveloped lands. My game is in medieval England. It's not quite there. Axe seems to make the whole game around the concept of domain play too, which is cool, but not quite what I'm looking for. I want them to be like low-level nobles, few obligations so they can mostly run around in the summer months, but still being able to build stuff on their land and occasionally being drawn to respond or something. Hopefully not in a way that makes a half-session orbit a single player needing to dispatch raiders on his land. Thanks. Quick edit. I also tried C and K. What is C and K? Not Castles and Crusades, because that's C and C. What's C and K? Somebody knows what C and K is? But it seemed quite a bit limited on what you can actually do with the land. Like, it seems like it only generates revenue, and there's not a whole lot of fun buildings you can build. You need to calculate the price of a gazebo on a series of tables, which is just inconvenient for my purposes. Terrence says he saw a game literally called Murder Hobo. Well, there you go. Okay, so the first thing I would say here, not knowing much of anything, I haven't read Wolves of God yet. I haven't actually read Dark Albion either. In fact, I hadn't heard of Dark Albion until just now. I would say, though, if you like Dark Albion, if it's really just the amount of soldiers or money you have, you could probably figure out a way. So let's just say, and again, maybe Dark Albion doesn't have a system like this, but let's say we're using usage dice, which I think we looked up at something else where they were using usage dice, or we talked about it, something else about using usage dice for domain kind of play stuff. And you had your D8. You could have, say, your local, I don't know, potential soldier population was a D8. Maybe if you just need to run a mock battle or a tourney, you could say roll a D8, and that's how many guys are available. Hopefully you get more than one. Maybe you'll get 6. If not, then it's just a bad week. They're off doing their own thing. You could probably do something like that. If you really like the abstractions of Dark Albion, then really I would just say, just take Dark Albion and add that little extra thing. Heck, take one of the other rules from their system and see what the table is and how it works with whatever abstract thing. I mean, that's what I would do. If you really like that one system, just fix that one bit in that one system you really like and go with it, as opposed to just trashing it for a whole other system. But I'd be curious what other people say. I did give it an upvote. And what do you folks think? Brian Smith says C and K, maybe castles and kingdoms or something. I mean, I guess that's what I would think, but I don't know. This is sometimes where I wish people would just spell things out. Hey, if you're typing this on your computer, it doesn't save you that much. I'm sure everyone now are pretty good typists. Just spell it out. But maybe he meant C and C. Well, the C and K aren't really close to each other, so I don't know how you get from castles and crusades to castles and something else. I don't know. I just am not, I don't know what it is, so. Let's see. Brian Blather says, games like MYZ and VESON have building systems that could be adapted easily. I have VESON, but I haven't read it yet. MYZ, which game is MYZ? I'm not, that acronym isn't jumping off at me. Clever the Griffin says, I've been trying to generate some easy rules for domain play, but I was mostly going to have that be between session stuff at domain level. If you're running a domain, your adventure is retired. I think, yes, I think this is also where I would say, hey, this is where using all the stuff we have, because everything's online, even if you're playing in person, everyone's got email, everyone's got laptops, tablets, everything else, is see if you can handle that stuff in between sessions. If it's just the players calculating some stuff and all you need to do is a single roll of dice or something like that, and then let them just do that on their own. Maybe just have them roll the dice in a dice roller and on a Discord or just on a web page, or you can roll the dice for them and say, here's what you got working, and then have it do in between. But I feel like a lot of GMs, a lot of games are still very much this, we do everything at the table, even though we could do this stuff remotely, semi-independently. Oh, Mutant Year Zero, MYZ. Okay. Terrence says, C and K, cooking in kitchens. Maybe. My bias is typing it when I made the comment about typing it out. Yeah. Look, I hear you. I hear you. But I find that there's so many games and stuff that, at least for me, there's a few that jump off at me and other ones I gotta just think about. So I appreciate it when it just gets spelled out, and then I don't have to go through those hoops of trying to figure out. Still don't know what C and K does. Well, let's see what some of these folks think. Gargamel Jubilex. White Hack does a judo move of making abstract domain rules that have a real depth beyond arithmetic bookkeeping. It might be worth expanding your concept of what domain play can be. Bases in White Hack are player defined and can be almost anything: a castle or a ship, a mentor, or even a Geralt of Rivia, young ward Ciri. They have a defined list of services they perform, and calling on those services puts stress on the base, which can make the base unavailable for a time, or even lead to its ruin. It's very flexible, evocative, and pushes adventure forward. I have the White Hack, but it's been a real long time since I've looked at it. Maybe I got to check that out. And then Social Rooster, backing him up, says, can't recommend White Hack's bases enough, especially since it's mainly up to the players what they get out of it and where the GM puts pressure on it. Stays out of the way when it's not the focus, too. All right. And Logan Maddox, the OP, says doesn't sound this is quite what I'm looking for. Oh, no, it says, but dang, if it doesn't sound quite exactly what I'm looking for. So long as the adventure is being pushed forward, can also be abstracted, so I don't have to try and involve everyone in the group for a hook that only matters to one of them. That's the real killer for me. They'll check it out. I'll have to check that out, too. Ryan Smith says, base equals service options and a cooldown timer. Seems even easy enough. Yes. Hopefully it doesn't come across in the fiction quite that video gamey, but basically that seems to be the gist of it. I'm not sure if it'll totally do what they want, but maybe it will. I wonder if this person wants all the rules. Because all these different versions of domain play are going to emphasize stuff that these different rules want. So obviously in that one Dark Albion, it is not their focus how many guys can you peel off to go do a thing? Because they're thinking, yeah, you're doing big battles or sieges or wars. So we're not worried about, okay, I need 5 guys to go on tournament with me. I mean, to be honest, though, if someone's going to say, if I'm playing let's say I'm the player and the GM's using this Dark Albion system and I'm looking at the rules and I'm looking at the stuff and I'm going, okay, I want to take 5 guys. So I want to go to Camelot and get in this tournament. And the GM's like, yeah, I don't know how we can do that in this system. I might be like, okay, so if we were doing so let me get this straight. If we needed to fight the Picts tomorrow, we've got that figured out. Yep. Hundreds of guys or however many guys, 10s, 20s, 50s of guys to get out in the field to battle the Picts tomorrow. Yep. So then if I can muster 50 men to go fight the Picts tomorrow, I can get that 5. Yep. Would make sense. Okay, then just give it to them. Like at that point, do you need the mechanic? Just say, hey, if you're able to muster a small army to go on campaign next week, then you can get 5 guys to accompany you on the tournament. Maybe it doesn't even need a mechanic, but maybe it seems like this person kind of wants this mechanic to sort of whatever they're doing to cover everything that they're doing, and that's really hard because some people's games are going to have a lot of that, and some games are going to have none of that, and some games are going to have totally different things. So a lot of times they just make they pick a focus and they build it. And I wonder if this person couldn't just take 1 or 2 of these and kind of mash them together to get that exact mix of things that they want. They might end up spending a whole ton of time rifling through systems and finding, oh, well, this is great at White Box. This White Hack thing is great, but it doesn't do this. So let's toss that out. Well, maybe just add that onto it, tweak it, do a little tweakery. Just for this AITA, Harn Manor is the only one I know offhand, but that's probably also more involved. You're looking for following this for other ideas, though. I'll give a thumbs up for mentioning Harn Manor. And then someone's correcting them on Axe. Axe runs a solid 14-level BX engine that is fully compatible with OSC, Laboratory, and so on. The domain system is an extra layer on top of that. And then they asked about Birthright. Pendragon, I'll give a thumbs up for Pendragon. Oh, he's got a lot of stuff going on. Ooh, this guy's mad. Well, this guy's already mashing together a whole bunch of stuff. So he's got Pendragon, adapting Pendragon through Wolves of God / Worlds Without Number with a few elements of other games. Maybe this person just has decided, I've mashed up enough. I shall mash up no more. Yeah, because there looks like they've got a lot of stuff. Whew. Yeah, maybe they need to simplify a little bit and then add some stuff on first or after. Let's see. Brian Smith recommends maybe Kingdoms and Warfare from MCDM, the Matt Colville stuff. I have not read Kingdoms and Warfare. Terrence says, feels like NPC soldiers would be falling over themselves to accompany their lord to a joust. Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes you end up in this box where you feel like, oh, I got to come up with a mechanic. How do I know? Or how do I? And it's like, just give it to them. You got 5 guys. I mean, I kind of what boil it down to is like, okay, is the one trouble with that system that you need to, the guy, the player's asking, can I take 6 guys with me? And you're trying to figure it out. Just say, yes, you got 6 guys. Like I said, I don't know what Dark Albion, all this stuff it does, but I have a feeling if you're able to muster a whole bunch of troops for any reason, you can find 5 guys. And if you can't find 5 guys, then maybe you shouldn't be able to muster a whole army. And if, and just, I don't need it. Just roll 2d4. How many guys are around? I'm looking around my little throne room. How many guys I can call on right now? Like 13th Warrior style or something. Like how many? In the beginning of 13th Warrior, when the sort of Arab writer gets kind of drafted into Bolvai's troop, right? He's sitting there, he's having a little celebration, and they get the news. And then, you got so many guys in the little feast hall. It's like, okay, how many are coming? I need 13, and you got 13 volunteers. I mean, great way to get some random people. Like, yeah, hey, I need 13 guys. And maybe some of them are warriors. Some of them are like the serving guys. Some of them are some squires. This is my chance to prove myself. Have some fun with it. You probably don't need to engage real system mechanics for like that. Just roll some dice. But this person, look, at first I was like, maybe this guy just doesn't want to do any kind of mashing up, but they're already doing a ton of mashing up. So maybe their head is spinning with mashups. Elfie says, I tend to follow a strict 2- limit when it comes to mashups. That's probably a good rule. The 2- rule. Absolutely. Brian Smith says, I would like a simple way to convert PC's existing skills, persuasion or something, and apply it to domain level roll to determine if they have convinced a baron to lend them aid or something. That's interesting. So, I'm in like BX land, right? So we don't have any persuasion skills, and I'm wary about giving players things like persuasion because I don't want it to take the place of them having to think about what they're offering. What they're offering, what they're giving up, how they're doing it. Oh, I just use persuasion, right? So what, because you hear that in sort of the 5th edition sense. My character wants to use persuasion to convince the barkeep to let us stay at the inn for free. Well, what does that mean? What are you actually offering this person? It's kind of like just like a little trick. It's sort of like I'm going to do this trick and then I'm going to get this thing for nothing. But that shouldn't be what persuasion is, because persuasion really isn't I'm getting something for nothing. Persuasion is maybe you're giving them something in the future that you may not get, as in the handsome man or beautiful woman or someone that will sort of make you think you're going to spend the night with them if you're a cop and you let them off from giving them a traffic ticket and then they give you a bad number. So when you try to call them up to make good on this this bargain you think you struck, you find out you got jammed up, right? That to me is kind of persuasion. So I would want to know, okay, well, what are you offering? And then you're going to have to figure out how to get out of it. Not just you make just some kind of roll and it's just a fait accompli and it's already kind of done. So I don't know that I would want to persuade something, but I could see wanting to take some kind of skill or something. I don't know. I'd have to figure it out because I kind of would want the players to engage in those kinds of bargaining, but I would be happy to do it on an off screen. Hey, send me some messages as you're sending messengers back and forth kind of thing to work out what this is going to look like. And we don't have to take up the whole table playing with those, but those can also become really fun sessions where there's a lot of that politicking around. Elfie says 5e actually has rules for that, but they are buried in the DMG. So much is buried in the DMG. Riven says, wow, I never even thought about the concept of what persuading entails. Now I just like the skill roll even more. Yeah, I'm just not big on those skills because they really, I mean, if you think about it, when someone's persuading you, usually they're offering something, maybe it's illicit, maybe it's something you're going to get. And then, it's kind of like the trick part of the persuasion is whether you end up getting it or not, right? Someone comes up to you and offers you something too good to be true, or maybe it's not, and then you accept it, and then sometimes you find out it's a lemon or something like that. To me is persuasion. To me, persuasion is that act of appealing to somebody's emotions in a positive way, which sort of, to me anyway, puts it on the opposite side of the spectrum from intimidation. Intimidation is you're appealing to those negative emotions, fear usually, kind of thing. And then diplomacy is your appeals to logic. You're going to do this because it's good for me. It's good for you. That to me is diplomacy, right? It's common sense. We've got 1 million troops on your border. You've got 10 guys. It's common sense, right? Whereas persuasion might be, oh, but if you join us, you'll be able to lead 1 million troops and all this stuff. Now, do you get that or not? I don't know, but that's kind of the persuasion. You're appealing to somebody's sense that they can be bigger than what they are. Oh, you're leading only 10 men now, but if you just join us, you can lead 50 men. Ooh, that's kind of persuasion. And then intimidation is, look, we're going to smash you. Not only are we going to kill you, we're going to kill everyone you know. We're going to kill everyone they know. We're going to kill everyone that we know just because we can. Step aside, right? So that's kind of how I break them down. But when you start to bring it down, you kind of start to think about, well, if you're persuading somebody, what does that mean? What does that entail? And those are really meaty, fun things. And yeah, when you just throw it on a roll, it's just kind of in and out when it should and could be something that has real consequences if you deploy them. Elfbay says, those rules make the skill checks modify the stance of the target from baseline. The GM is encouraged to use the player's description of how they do it into account when assigning the DC. Yes, of course. Of course it is. But it's still just a skill. It still ends up being something that kind of begins and ends with that skill roll and not really a lot of the other consequences, right? Because I at least the way I've always seen it, you don't really extend. It's just, okay, that's the role. Whereas to me, I want them to be into it more. Sure, they can describe it, but describing it doesn't always, unless you push for it, describing may not be getting to the meat of it. You can do that as a GM. You can force them to say, no, what are you really offering them? But describing it could also mean like, oh, I put on a sexy tone and I whisper into his ear, blah, 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 right? But it's not really saying, no, but what are you offering them? Are you making something saying like, you're going to come to my chambers tonight and you can have your way with me if you let me do this, or are you giving something up? And then also, is your intention really to go through with that after you've made your roll, or is that the end of it? Because the way the rolls tend to work is it's just transactions just instantly over and done, as opposed to something that has, it lingers. If you're telling somebody you can come to my room tonight, then we want to play through, okay, night falls. Do you go to your room and unlock the door and wait for this person to show up? Or do you do something else? Like, what do you do? Because that's kind of part of it, but the roll tends to kind of just end it one way or another, kind of in that moment. See, Brian Smith says, all right, I just mean some attribute tied to your character that affects your attempt to bargain with something in a higher level view, probably not played out at the table. Yeah, I think you could come up with something. I mean, what I'd probably do is just have give your domain some attributes. You could give it something. You could kind of think about what it means. Like, what would charisma of a domain look like? Is it the beauty of the domain? Is it how attractive it would be? Is it would be how prosperous, it seems. And then you could use those to make some rolls. And then it could actually give you something concrete for players to go for. If, say, your domain charisma was based on the look, then making it beautiful, especially if you're playing something like, I feel like Arthurian kind of thing where you want to make it, like, what is it, in Excalibur? It seemed like the walls of the castle of Camelot seem to be covered in like metal plating or something, it's all shining like a mirror, but it seems so beautiful. Like maybe that's, or you have wonderful gardens. So, if I tend and I bring in a gardener and I make beautiful gardens, that'll kind of raise that charisma. So that when people come, they'll want to come because what a beautiful land this is. You could kind of, I feel like you could kind of do something like that. I don't have any particularly well-rounded thoughts on it, but, Brian Smith says, it's like role-playing your social skills versus role-playing your intelligence skills. You as a player may not be good at it, but your character might be very good. Yes, but I would say the same thing with your intelligence type skills. I, as a GM, require you to know what you're trying to do. You may not know all the steps, like picking a lock. I know the basics about picking a lock, the most minor basics, okay? I don't expect anybody to know more than I do, and I'm fine if you know less. But if the door, you can't get in the door, and it's got a hole, you need to say to me, I'm picking the lock to get through the door. It's not, to me, my character walks up to the door and then we roll some dice and your character picks the lock. Like, no, you got to figure that part out. And part of the role playing is you're putting your brain in that character's body. So you need to say the word. They may know, like with language, right? They're going to speak languages you don't know. And if you just say, I tell them in Goblin, great. I'm not going to expect you to know Goblin. At the same time, I'm going to expect you to know what they're going to say. And it's kind of the same thing. I mean, I don't play them any differently. You're going to have to tell me what you're trying to do. Now, your player may know the ins and outs. Like you say, I'm going to set a snare trap in the woods. I'm a ranger. I'm going to set a snare trap in the woods. Okay, great. I don't know how to set a snare trap in the woods. I believe that your ranger knows how to do it. So I'm not going to ask you to suss out the whole thing. But in terms of setting the trap at all, that's your idea. It has to come from you. At least that's the way I play it. Oh, we got a lot of messages here. Let's see. What? There's mustards? Oh, it's the gray poupon. Oh, boy, I missed some. Darren says getting ghosted by NPC hookup sounds awful. Yeah, I imagine it would be, right? I imagine it would. But I think at the same time, it's kind of like that's what you gotta deal with. Like, and if you ghost that NPC, if you're the ghoster as opposed to the ghostee, then you're gonna have to figure that next time you come to town. You're in that small village and you got someone, the sheriff or the mayor or the tavern keeper, you ghosted them the last time. That makes your life more difficult. That's a really ongoing consequence, and that you're gonna have to deal with. You're gonna have to live with the outcome, the consequence of you ghosting them, or of you promising something and then having it fall through. And Elfate says, a crappy DMing remark, which I missed somewhere up here in the chat, with regards to DMs that let it all lie on a single roll. Yeah, I hear you, Elfbait. I do think, though, the kind of the rules and some of that stuff kind of encourage you to do that and encourage you to think about just the roll and maybe an immediate consequence, but not a long range consequence. And I really I have fun a lot with these long range consequences. And when I do my gaming recap next week, it was very fun when a few of those consequences came home to roost for my party last night. When they tried to get some stuff done. It was a lot of fun. Brian Smith, I agree. I never let players declare what role they're making. They say what they want to do. The GM calls what the skills applicable to apply to the role of it. Yeah, I think that's a big thing. And that's also hard. And in a lot of new, look, I get it from a player perspective. I'm looking down at my sheet. I'm really good at persuasion. So let me say, I want to use my persuasion because as a player, that's what I want to do. But as a GM, I have to tell them, okay, but you need to, tell me what that means, right? What is this thing you're doing? And I'll let you know if that is persuasion, because maybe you think it's persuasion, but it's actually diplomacy, or you're threatening them. Like you want to say, I want to tell them I'm going to kill them if they don't let us in the castle. That's not persuasion. That's intimidation. So you want to use your persuasion. That's fine. Come up with something persuasive. That ain't it. That ain't it. All right. Well, a lot of lively discussion in here. I don't feel like we actually covered all that much in terms of just stuff, but I feel like there was good chatter here in the chat. Anything else before I call it a stream? Brian Smith says I roll perception as some BS and you won't get any pizza shared with you. Yeah, but look, it's this is where I feel like sometimes it's the blind leading the blind, right? If you're a new GM and you're new players, you can just come into I don't even want to call it bad habits, but just certain styles of play because nobody knows any different. And I think some folks like that in their play as GMs and as players, and then you end up teaching people. So I think the best way to combat it is just to, in your games, get people into being descriptive. I think it also helps them in the fiction. If you start saying, no, tell us what your character's doing, then I think you start getting into beyond your character is just sort of this marionette that you're kind of is, and it feels more, you feel more in the real flow, right? Instead of thinking like, oh, I'm going to roll this meta skill. It's like, no, I'm looking around. Okay, well, this is what you see. And then you start really getting into, okay, well, I lift that up or I do that. Whereas, yeah, if you just bottom line it to skill checks, then you never leave that separation between the fiction. There's you're always going to end up with some gap between where you are and the fiction is, where we really want to get as close and get in that fiction immersion as much as possible. Brian Smith says, it's especially reinforced in VTTs. New players are literally just clicking on skill and dice roll, and it's kind of set in stone a bit. Yeah, that's another tough thing. I don't know if say resisted is the right word, but I've kind of avoided when I was doing this, like the game I'm running now. I thought about for a hot minute of setting up a VTT to do it, and I said I don't really want all that work. And yeah, I think they're just the way I like to play. Doesn't really lend itself, or I don't need a lot of what VTTs are doing. But yes, it does kind of push things. It can push things a little bit. And Alfie says, every D&D DM should run Call of Cthulhu at least a few times. It really helps with how to approach skill-based play. Interesting. I'll probably have to ask. I have Alyssa Faden tonight. By the way, this is I didn't mention this before. I probably should have mentioned this at the top, but this is a 2-for streaming day for me. There's this, and then at 8 p.m. Eastern, Alyssa Faden will be on for her monthly talk. I always like to ping her brain about Cthulhu because I've only played the intro adventure, whichever one's the intro adventure they give you. I think in the latest version of Call of Cthulhu, but maybe I'll have to ask her about doing skills and stuff more because it is a skill-based system, and I think we have talked about a little bit in the past and how there's kind of you're supposed to kind of allow people to do a lot before you ask for skills because in Call of Cthulhu, a lot of your skills tend not to be that great, and you do things like pushing your luck and stuff like that, and using your luck points to kind of mitigate the high chances of failure. Brian Blatt says, I'll slap some virtual faces. And then Brian Smith says, WotC will probably be offering virtual face slaps, favored with Elemental Magic FX soon. If WotC doesn't, then maybe Roll20 will. Somebody will. That'll be the new thing. Foundry, Roll20, Fantasy Grounds. Somebody will offer face slaps. Just wait till we get on to virtual or augmented reality where you could have some kind of haptic, you could wear haptic masks and you get that real, slap kind of thing. Brian Smith says, I've read several Call of Cthulhu game scenarios, never ran or played in one. I've only played in just the one, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. All right, folks. Well, I got more people in here now than at the start, and I'm bailing out. Well, sorry. Thanks for all those coming in. Even if you came in late, appreciate you being here. Give a thumbs up on your way out. I will be back online in a few scant hours. 5.5 hours. I'll be back online talking to Alyssa for our monthly chat. Alyssa Faden, cartographer, professional royale. So check back in. Tomorrow I will have the interview that I was supposed to have today. So that's why this stream flip-flopped from the usual Friday. Apologies for that, but stuff happens. Everybody have a great day, night, or whenever you're watching or listening to this. Game on. I'll talk to you later.